Out of intense complexities, intense simplicities emerge. Those are the words of the first British Prime Minister to serve Queen Elizabeth II, Winston Churchill. And my character today as guest perfectly fits that example. He was born 2 years to the end of the Second World War and embarked on a profession of journalism about 54 years ago, which shaped his personality, becoming not only in Africa, but particularly in Cameroon, the duplicate of the president's voice. He's one of the best known public figures in the country who has lived basically nearly all the most important events of modern Cameroonian history. Peter ESOKA, welcome to my show.
Thank you for inviting me.
You are a year older than US President Joe Biden, who is 77 years old today. Each time you wake up, as you progressively become an octogenarian, what are your primary chores today?
Primary choices?
Chores, what do you do in the morning?
Chores, what do I do?
Yeah.
Actually, I was, apart from the busy schedule that I would have in my office, I played tennis, and I have the pleasure of meeting people, and particularly church people. I spend a lot of time with the church, especially when I'm in my healthy days. I've been a little bit off that these days, including the pandemic that is putting everybody on guard. So I spend a lot of time at home.
The things you just described to me, for example, playing tennis, meeting people, going to church, it sounds like a routine life schedule. Is it a childhood attitude of such morning occurrences?
I'm sure. I would like to say I was an athlete, not of world class, of course, but that kept me going from primary school through secondary school, high school. And then,
what kind of athleticism in particular? Running,
everything,
jumping?
Everything. When I talk of athletics, that's a generalized, let's call it a generic statement. I played football. When I was in secondary school, I played ping pong, and I played volleyball. I remember I was even head of the schools and university team, the captain of the volleyball team. I played football at the finals of the schools and university games in Yaoundé in front of the former president, Amadou Ahidjo.
We'll be coming to the details of that in a moment. Peter ESOKA, you were born same year the Allied powers through Operation Torch liberated North Africa in World War II from their belligerents. I'm talking about the Germans and the Italians. Same year, the French introduced the first coin of the franc in French Equatorial Africa, in Cameroon in particular, 1943. According to you, what are the best recollections of the circumstances under which you were born that you still have in your memory? Which place in particular?
Nothing in particular. I think we were born in a very quiet atmosphere, very little involved in political affairs. We were so much into church business, and that's
where was that? Where were you born particularly?
In Kumba.
In Kumba. Okay.
Yes, and so we lived with the people of, by then I would call it the village of Kumba, and that's where I spent most of my life. If I have to reminisce on my early childhood, of course I'll talk about Kumba at every moment. Yes, and the people who were around us were all like family. The Moketers, the Piers, the Sonas, the Ndibas, and you name them. And their legacy remains, and we have carried it through.
Who were some of your childhood friends, and where are they today? Do you remember some of them? Just a few.
Most of them are gone. Most of them are gone, and one that comes into my mind very often, and with whom I lived, and whose children are almost like my children, and we live almost together even till today, is Mr. William Sapebong. Mr. William Sapebong, well, he was from Mukonje, but we were all living in Kumba.
You mean the father of Yoe Sapebong, who used to present news on CRTV?
Yes. They were like they are my children.
They are your children?
Yes.
Okay, of course, we are in Africa and we live in the principle of the extended family. Cameroon today, as we know, is a polity, it's a country with plus 350 ethnic groupings.
Did we get to that already? 350?
That is what the latest anthropologists are doing research in universities. I just want to gather from you which of the ethnic compositions of Cameroon are you from?
Which of the ethnic compositions am I from? Well, I could have claimed to be Bafo, but I would not. I speak the Douala language. That tells you.
So, where did your parents come from? Peter ESOKA, that we know today.
They are from there, but settled in Kumba.
In Kumba. What brought them to Kumba? What have
Missionary
they told you?
work.
Missionary work.
They came to do work with God's people.
Okay. What was mom's name and dad's name? And based in Kumba, which church were they doing missionary work in?
They were doing missionary work in Basel Mission Kumba,
which is today the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon.
Mother is Mary, Father Peter.
Can you remember any childhood lesson they gave you in those days as growing up in a Christian family?
Try as much as possible to be disciplined. Follow the principles of church doctrine.
If that is the education they gave you, where did you attend your primary school before heading to secondary school?
Basel Mission School, Kumba.
Kumba.
That's where I started my primary school. Ended up there in Basel Mission, Kumba. Got through the entrance examination to CPC Bali, and then I went up to the Northwest region.
Can you remember the name of your headmaster at the time? And what kind of songs, for example, do you used to sing in primary school in those days?
Well, we used to
in the days of the native authority school.
We used to sing the usual nursery rhymes, and of course, when we...
For example, do you remember one of them?
What do I remember? I remember many of them.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, well, right. At the little nursery, we used to sing, "Hey, diddle, diddle, the cat and the fiddle. The cow jumped over the moon. The little dog laughed, ha, ha, to see such fun. And the dish ran away with the spoon." Those impossibilities, but they created an atmosphere of imagination. How could the cow jump over the moon? You know, some of those things. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, Humpty Dumpty, and all of those. Then in the higher primary school, of course, we went into our songbooks, particularly the sacred songs and solos, and we sang, and later on the church hymnary.
Absolutely. You are a graduate from one of the oldest secondary schools in the country today. In reality, the second oldest secondary school in the history of Cameroon. the Cameroon Protestant College, CPC, Bali, which was created in 1949 in the then British Southern Cameroon, 10 years later than the Roman Catholic Mill Hill Mission School, St. Joseph College, Sase, CPC Bali, which has graduated two of Cameroon's former prime ministers, Philemon Yang and Simon Achidi Achu. What was your life in secondary school like, and who were some of your classmates in the secondary school system that, and where have some of them been found?
A disciplined life. It was a Christian secondary school, still a Christian secondary school, and its basic principles were discipline. And of course, since it was religious, we were stuffed in with a lot of religion also. And so that we would never forget. Secondary school colleagues, we had the Gideon Takas, we had the Francis Wetters.
Francis Wetter, you mean the former Deputy Director General of CRTV?
Well, you wanted me to call the names of the people, not their titles.
I will do the titling.
Yeah, you can do the title.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Gideon Taka, why didn't you make a comment about Gideon Taka?
Gideon Taka, the former greatest radio broadcaster.
Former greatest radio broadcaster.
He's out of service now.
Watch your words.
Absolutely.
He was one of the good broadcasters. And it happens that many of us were of the same class who were at the radio at the time. And had the Sami Angus and so of late, and a few others who worked with Radio Cameroon at the time. And then there are, of course, many others. We were 60 of us at the beginning. We ended up, after 5 years, 49 of us.
And then university in the former Federal University of Cameroon. What did you study?
University of Cameroon, well, I did the English degree. And were some of the pioneers of the English department at the University of Yaoundé, after it had moved from Federal University of Cameroon. And I think it was a wonderful time because at the time we had so much freedom in our education because imagine that a class, a graduating class of 1971, we were 13 of us graduating, compared to what is today, where it's thousands of people graduating. So at least we had quite a close relationship with our lecturers.
Do you remember any of your university lecturers today?
Well, at this we had Miss Todd, we had Mr. Sexton, of course, and the late Professor Mbasimanga.
So Bernard Fallon did not teach you?
No, Bernard Fallon did not teach me.
Okay. You started working with then Radio Cameroon in 1967, if my research is correct.
Yes,
just
correct.
6 years after reunification. Why did you choose to become a journalist?
I don't know whether it was by choice or by coincidence or the will of God. When I was in secondary school, or high school actually, my intention was to do law. Because of certain circumstances, including language, when I got to Yaoundé and went to the law faculty or department, whichever, I weighed myself on the French language, and I found myself quite wanting. So, and incidentally, they were opening up the English department, so I chose the easy way, and I did an English degree, if you should say so.
So, describe to me, how was your first day of broadcast like?
Well, I cannot say. We were recruited, and we came to Yaoundé, and we were introduced to the department to which we were supposed to go. there we met a few people, especially the Anglophone folks, like Mrs. Kima, Epson Chair, Ann Tamko, Sami Angu, Francis Wete. That's a group of people. We all were at the radio. And so it was again an easy flow because I met people I knew, and so they could give me a guiding. And I do appreciate that. And on my own, we started growing, and we got ourselves integrated in the whole thing. Broadcasting, many people would think it's just an easy go. You just go and get a microphone and start talking, and no, it needed at least some schooling.
How rigorous was it by then to be a journalist, especially when it comes to fact-checking? We're just in a one-party system.
We had some news agencies from which we collected information.
Wire services.
Yes. And we used a lot of
Reuters by then,
foreign radio stations, even to collect information, like the BBC, the VOA, and others. So we worked somehow borrowing information from different parts, and then we created our own bulletins. Of course, the natural thing is that you have news agency that supplied news from the government and other different parties in the country. One-party system, of course, everybody had to adhere to that one-party system. There's nothing you could do about it.
I equally did research, except you correct me. One of the landmark newscasts which you presented was the news of the referendum day in 1972, which moved the country from a federal to a unitary state. Journalistically, how did that day unfold?
I was in my office, and I was given a call. It was not like a news broadcast. I was given a call that came from the presidency and said, the president is going to speak to the National Assembly on this referendum business. I said, and you have been asked to come over and you present the president's message in English. It puzzled me a bit because I didn't find myself capable of doing that at that time, because prior to that, somebody else was reading the president's messages in English.
Who was that?
It was not like it is today. Professor Wete was doing that, and then afterwards, how they asked me to come and do it, I still want to believe it's God's bidding. So I went, and they handed me the texts of the president's message in English and said, you're going to present this. And that's where I started. And this was on the 6th of May, 1972. And I did that. And since then, it seems that it clicked. And I've been doing the president's messages since then. So you calculate 1972 until this day.
That's quite a long time. How is it done? Are you called to the president's office, you see it, or you are just giving a translated text? Because most Cameroonian knows you as the English voice of the president's address to the nation.
Remember that there's a whole department of translation at the presidency. So most of the time, they do the translation and they call me. So we do a last-minute proofreading of the message so that I get acquainted with it. And then I also have the opportunity of being there when he's recording, and I follow the pace of his presentation And so when my turn comes, I'll do it just as he tried to do it, but in the other language.
Absolutely. It's quite a privilege that most Cameroonians would like to have access to. Have you ever, in such occasions, because of your voice of the president in English, been invited, be it Bia or Aijo in his office, I mean privately, have you ever had time to meet them one-on-one?
I would like to be categorical. No.
Why?
It's not in my bidding. I've asked for audiences, and they've not been granted as such. And so I'm not going to force myself into talking with my overall boss if it is not in his thinking that it should happen. But we shake hands.
Absolutely, you do shake hands. Personally, what do you make of that exercise, apart from other activities that you do in life and will be coming into them?
Doing my job. I think that is it. At the beginning, it was like they got a journalist from CRTV or from radio to come and do the president's message in English. And I did it as a journalist or a professional. So that's how I looked at it. It is not a profession. I'm not, I repeat, I'm not paid for it.
And that is a question I was going to ask, if this is a consultancy work or something different.
No,
this is part of services delivered to the nation.
Service delivered to the nation. And for all these years, that's what it has been.
Absolutely.
So many rumors have come up how, you know, I claim millions of francs when I finish reading the president's message. But that's absolutely not the case.
Okay, Peter ESOKA, this is what your alma mater, the Cameroon Protestant College, CBC, Bali. This is how... CPC, I beg your pardon, CPC, Bali. This is how they describe you on their website, their official school website. Peter ESOKA is one of the few Cameroonians who is known by virtually everyone. This is because of the impact which he has left in his professional life that spans over 40 years.
And more.
And more, absolutely. What are some of the first programs that you ran on the radio that kept the people listening to you?
Charles, that's a little difficult because it was a question of mini-mellow. We were almost everywhere. We did almost everything. I was into the programs department. I was in the news department. I was into reporting. And finally, I was into sports especially. And so all of those created an impact on people. I spoke good English at the time, which was not very characteristic with everybody, which is not even characteristic with everybody today, because even though some of you have gone to big schools,
and our grammar is quite complicated.
So, at least people who listen to you, the melodious approach, melodramatic, made people want to listen to this man. Who is this man? And you know, it's not like today where you have television, where they will see Charles EBUNE, they will not just hear him. Some of us were only heard, we were not seen.
This is what the school talks about you further.
Right.
As a journalist, Peter ESOKA created great sensations in the 70s through his emotional sports commentaries, Radio Cameroon, end of quotation. You are one of the nation's greatest sport reporters and commentators. Tell me about that experience of running commentaries for the radio.
Charles, it was not in my making. I never even thought I would be a sports commentator. In my lifetime, especially junior life, my childhood, I was a very quiet type of person, a little bashful. Nobody thought I could speak as much as I did. And I got to Radio Cameroon. The late David Ndele, he was our boss at the time. He called me to find out, what exactly do you think you can do? I said, well, I've been put into programs and wherever. But I've been a sportsman. I was a footballer. I was, I played all kinds of things. So he said, what about going to the sports department? I told him, wherever you send me, I will go. I almost sounded like one of these biblical people. Was that Ruth telling Naomi, wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you die, I will die. So I told him, wherever you want to send me, I will go. So they sent me to the sports department. Well, of course, doing all the things. I was in the news department. I was reading the news, of course. I was doing programs and other issues because, of course, we were not too many of us. So nearly every one of us did some of those issues. So I had to go to this stadium. By then they called it the Hippodrome Stadium. That is where the town council is today, and
just near Avenue de Banque in Yaoundé.
Yes, just there. So they took me to the stadium once, and it was Mr. Gideon Tucker, although my classmate, but he had come to the radio before I did, so he was more acquainted with some of those things. And I got there, and he did a few commentaries and handed over the microphone to me and speak. Oh gosh, that was my greatest disaster in broadcasting sports. I thought that radio commentary is just screaming. I screamed and shouted and all kinds of things. I tell you what, after that day, that same evening and the next day, I had a chest pain because I'd over-exerted myself and spoken and shouted and sometimes saying practically nothing. But the next day, my boss called me and said, good, you have the potential, but control. You need a bit of control, my friend. I said, yes, sir. So that was what was some of the good things that were then. Your boss would call you and caution you. Yeah. I don't know what you guys do today, but you'll be cautioned and you'll be given.
Which are some of the Nations Cups or World Cups that Cameroon participated that you ran commentaries?
Yeah, well, the most famous that everybody makes reference to is the 1972 African Nations Cup, where I kept the country spellbound, and when we lost to Congo in the semifinals, the whole country was in mourning.
At the Amadou Ayo Stadium?
Yes, just built.
Just built in 1972.
1972.
After the radio experience, you handled some TV programs. You were deputy director for radio news at one moment, but you equally did programs on TV, Hotline, Conversation. How was the television experience?
Conversation, yes. Hotline was on the radio.
On the radio, yeah.
That was what?
That's the last television program I watched you when I was growing.
Conversation.
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It was an interesting thing. We were trying to retrace a bit of history of the country. So I was asked to, or I made a proposal to go out to some of these people who had lived the history of the country and try to talk to them about that history.
And do you think some of them made significant contributions that helped dispel or made the public understand certain events that were giving misinformation?
Of course, it all depends on the anybody's interpretation. But I think from the questions we ask them, just as you're asking me now, people who would listen of what I would say about what happened yesterday or would happen tomorrow, Some people will take it. Some people will trash it. And but I spoke to some sensible people. They had their political leanings, but the general regard was of what made our history. What part did you play? We talked to wise fellows like E.T. Egbe, yes, those kinds of people. I even talked to John Gute as a traditional leader and
the current prime minister.
The current prime minister, and went to his Yaoundé Palace, not
the Bongongo one.
Not the Bongongo one, and we had a chat, and because of his knowledge, he had some knowledge based on probably his educational background. He had a lot of stuff to tell us, and I think if CRTV goes back to its archives, you'll find some of those things there.
Definitely. Let's move from your professional life and talk your understanding of certain occurrences in Cameroon. First of all, you lived one of the most turbulent moments in the history of our country, the 1990s. The return of multi-party politics.
Before then, Charles, I lived Reunification.
Tell me a little.
That's a monumental event.
I was coming to that. How did you live the Reunification in particular?
I was in secondary school.
Did you vote?
Did I vote?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
And where was your vote for Reunification?
I think they say that when you're going to vote, your vote is your personal decision. I'm not going to make a proclamation of that to the public.
Peter ESOKA is a great nationalist,
but I voted.
Above limits that he's not afraid to say whatsoever he has to say.
I voted, and we are where we are. You can read that.
Okay, you voted for Reunification. I interpret it that way.
My state is in your republic.
Yes. it's somewhere around Kumba.
Of course. Down the Mbonge area.
Mbonge area, yeah. I've been to Bai Estate. But this is a question I want to put to you. When you look at the events of our time, of my generation, the way we have interpreted it on social media, the way we have told the story on radio, television, because of the liberty environment, do you think we have harmed the nation somehow when it comes to telling the facts?
Well, we did the best that we could. Those of us who were there, we told the story as we could tell it. Now, it all depends. You know, you have all these historians, their PhDs and whatever it is, and each one of them is coming out with a story about reunification and where we are today. Sometimes, to tell you the truth, I get a little confused about some of the stories that are told. But incidentally, many of us are not even questioned on some of the things that we did. I say I was a returning officer, polling. I had to walk from Kumba to Bai Estate, crossing over little creeks and on canoes and on, you know.
Since I have the chance of talking to an active member of the reunification process, what did that day look like? I hear all stories of rigged voting on that day. All kind of stories, I hear them. You lived them. How was that day in particular?
If rigging was as probably we claim it is today, then there would have been massive rigging. There was an element of trust. Can you imagine a young boy still in secondary school carrying polling boxes from Bai to get back to Kumba?
That's plus 10 kilometers of walking.
What are you calling 10 kilometers of walking?
I just said
you
plus.
You got to get to Lobe Estate and get to Mbonge and get to those places. That's a whole day's walk.
Sure.
That's all day's work.
Sure.
And at my age, and I was going all alone, I didn't even have security with me, but I was carrying polling boxes with
historical
material that I got right to Kumba and presented it to the senior divisional officer. And now, if they're talking about rigging, maybe in some places you cannot go through an electoral process without somebody raising a voice about something that had happened, rigging or whatever it is. But generally, I think it was as transparent as it could be. There may be flaws. There might have been some flaws in certain areas. But I think it was proper. It was right. And at the time, even those who lost in the plebiscite didn't quite shout out foul. But, you know, obviously some people say, no, it was not correct, why is it that, and so forth. But I think it was something that had to happen, and it happened.
Another significant moment you lived before we move to press freedom issues, where you serve as the chairman of the National Communication Council, is the transfer of power in 1982, November 6. Amadou Ahidjo resigned on November 4. They had to wait. The then House Speaker, the constitutional person to give power to Paul Biya, who was in Brazil, Solomon Tandemuna. They had to wait for his return within 2 days. How did that day look like? Most people have told me that it's like heaven and earth came together and the world came to an end in Cameroon.
Charles, I was not here. I was in the United States of America. And earlier on that year, a few months before his resignation, President Ahidjo came to the United States. And we met him, some of us, those of us whom he knew by name, we met him, and there was no indication that President Ahidjo was going to leave power. You know, so many stories have been told about his leaving power and all kinds of things, including manipulations and so forth. But from where I was, I heard the stories of how the country exploded. There was a little bit of timidity at the beginning, but then when people realized that it was true, there was a lot of jubilation. People went all over the place, and musicians composed songs, all kinds of things. The political people they didn't just know what to do. I think there was joy par excellence.
Okay. Since 1990, we have been living in a plural community. I'm talking about democracy. Since the 1990s, you had been a member of the National Communication Council before you were appointed in 2013, if my statistic is not wrong, as chairman of that council. What evaluation do you make of press freedom in this country? Have we evolved?
There has been a really evolving of the media. Lots of things have changed. But what I fear is that, like I said the other day, we've become so freedom-oriented that we have become reckless about freedom. As I also said, complete freedom destroys freedom. As a regulator, I do not question the freedom of the journalists, but I always caution them that to be free doesn't mean to be reckless. You have to be a responsible person. That's where freedom counts. When you feel free to do something and you don't have to turn over your eyes to see whether something is following you on the back, because you have sort of committed yourself to something. Because while people are talking about, oh, well, foreign people talk about no freedom in Cameroon, but I think it is not the case. It is the Cameroonian himself, the journalist himself, who has to advocate for his freedom and let it be. As a regulator, we try to give counsel to some. But I also ask the question, how many times do we even work with the council, that is the professionals and the council? Because it is there that we can draw certain lessons, certain experiences, and then we'll be able to build an atmosphere where people are free to do certain things, but with reason and responsibility.
In the moment the interview will be coming to an end, I will talk about you as a family man. Let me just ask a question about those who incarnate Cameroonian media today, and let me just talk about some television presenters. When you look at the new generation of what I call the Cameroonian television stars, Bruno Bijang, Romuald Ntwisenkok, Cedric Nufule of Equinox, Benin Bumagana, Badwin Sama, the list can go on, Jean-Bruno Tanye, I can name them. When you look at our television stars, are we up to the task?
We still have to work hard, attempt to come to perfection, but we're still very far away from it. You see, one of the things that the council is supposed to do is to check on the language that is being used. But unfortunately, if I call Charles EBUNE and tell him that this is what you're supposed to do and not that, Charles takes offense. Now, in trying to make the work good, you must be ready to listen to elders. And that's what is not happening today. When we were growing up, we knew we didn't know much. So we listened to those who were ahead of us, and they taught us exactly what we had to do. Today, there is an element, the mentality of being perfect because you've been to a university, you've come out with a PhD. That's the all in all. Journalism is practiced in the field, not on your paper, sir. It gives you a theoretical notion when you go to school. But to be a good professional journalist, you're learning it from the field. It's not in the classroom.
Reflections. In front of me are 3 copies of your publication. Stand Up, Be Strong, Don't Quit. The other one, Lamentation for a Beloved Country. And this one, Journey to Emmaus, Reflections on Religion, Faith, Christian Life, and Festivals. How essential are inspirational works to your perception of life?
I think I was expressing my life in those reflections. And if you know, it touched on the lives of many people from a political, social, and religious perspective. And I felt satisfied. And that's at the end of my life. That's what I think many people should remember. Unfortunately, as we say, when you put something in writing, the Cameroonian is lost because he doesn't read. When I was doing reflections on radio, hundreds of people would glue themselves to the radio and listen. But when they were published, they're there. People have refused to buy them. You know, just to get, you can even want to give them for free. And you don't have anybody who's accepting to even take a copy and read.
What is the central message in reflections.
The central message is focus. Is focus. If you want to make this country what it should be focused on lots of things, and you will build up a nation of people with a rationale.
Who is Peter ESOKA as a family man? Father of how many children?
3 children.
3 children? Okay. And where are they today?
The 3 are in the United States, and they have 4 others who are my grandchildren.
Wow. That is great. Peter ESOKA, this interview will be coming to an end in less than 2 minutes. One of Britain's greatest writers, Thomas Hardy, wrote in one of his publications, The Mayor of Casterbridge, his definition of life. He said, quote, and I think it should be the last line of The Mayor of Casterbridge, that happiness is an occasional episode in a general drama of pain. What is your own definition of life?
Be conscientious and look at life from a positive perspective, having a smile always and being humble.
We cannot end the interview without your religious aspect. You are so connected to the church that I almost forgot that you are even a choir master. I would like that you sing verse 1 of hymn 200 of the Douala Church hymnal.
I cannot remember that.
Di bongo la jemi alam.
Di bongo la jemi alam. Nende Yesu dali di bam. And then the chorus goes, Tonjanu ben yene yoto asilogi o mukoko asilogi o mukoko.
For those who don't know, possibly it is the English version should be on Christ
the solid rock I stand. All over the ground is sinking sand. All over the ground is sinking sand.
Should we conclude that your life has been built on solid rock?
My life has been good, that's all. I am highly favored.
Peter ESOKA, journalist, writer, broadcaster, regulator, chairman of the African Network of Communication Regulatory Authorities, the duplicate of the president's voice in the English language in Cameroon, and all other titles that can go. Thank you very much for having this conversation with us on CRTV, and we hope to see you very soon in other occasions.
Now you've done it my way. You've come to conversation to converse with me. So keep up the good work, and we shall be watching you. I've always liked your incisive questions when you meet people. So just develop it and be the man you're supposed to be. Focus.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much indeed for watching. On behalf of the entire production crew, keep on watching CRTV programs, and more are just after this.
Je vous exhorte de nouveau à porter vos masques, à vous laver régulièrement les mains et à faire appel à un médecin ou à tout autre personnel de santé au cas où des symptômes apparaissent. C'est le seul moyen de préserver les vies et de freiner la propagation du virus.